The silence was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic drip of water from the eaves. They were inside, celebrating, clinking champagne glasses, their laughter a cruel symphony to my ears. The flight confirmations, painstakingly arranged, now felt like shards of glass in my hand. I, Scarlett, stood outside in the cold, the architect of their Parisian dream, now exiled from their joy. They thought they had won. If family means everything to you, subscribe now and never let betrayal win. For years, I had played the dutiful daughter, the reliable sister, the one who always remembered birthdays and anniversaries. My parents, bless their hearts, had always dreamed of visiting Paris, a city they had only seen in movies and magazines. Dad, a retired history teacher, longed to walk the halls of the Louvre, to stand beneath the Eiffel Tower, to breathe in the very air that once inspired Hemingway and Picasso. Mom, a romantic at heart, envisioned strolling along the Seine, hand in hand with Dad, their love rekindled amidst the city of lights. Mark, my brother, ever the pragmatist, just wanted to experience the culinary delights, the Michelin-starred restaurants, the pastries that everyone raved about. I wanted to give them that. I worked tirelessly, researching the best hotels, securing coveted reservations, and coordinating flights that would minimize travel time and maximize their enjoyment. I poured my heart and soul into crafting the perfect itinerary, a seamless blend of historical landmarks, cultural experiences, and gastronomic adventures. I even learned a few basic French phrases, eager to impress them with my newfound linguistic skills. This trip was supposed to be my redemption, my ticket back into their good graces after years of feeling like an outsider. Ever since I chose a different career path than Mark, a path that wasn't deemed respectable enough, I had sensed a growing distance between us, a subtle but palpable disapproval that hung in the air like a persistent fog. This trip, I hoped, would bridge that gap, would prove that I was still a valuable member of the family, that my contributions were worthy of recognition and appreciation. I had imagined their faces lighting up as they marveled at the Mona Lisa, their eyes sparkling as they toasted to their love beneath the Parisian sky, their voices filled with gratitude as they thanked me for making their dream a reality. I craved that validation, that sense of belonging, that feeling of being truly loved and accepted. The invitation to join them for a pre-departure dinner had felt like a victory, a sign that my efforts had finally paid off. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that was both stylish and comfortable, wanting to make a good impression. I brought a bottle of vintage champagne, eager to celebrate their upcoming adventure. But the moment I walked through the door, I sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a subtle undercurrent of tension that made my stomach churn. Mark greeted me with a forced smile, his eyes lacking their usual warmth. Mom and Dad seemed distracted, their attention focused on some unspoken issue. As we sat down to dinner, the conversation felt strained, filled with awkward silences and superficial pleasantries. I tried to steer the discussion towards the trip, eager to share my excitement and anticipation, but my attempts were met with lukewarm responses. Finally, as the meal drew to a close, Mark cleared his throat and turned to me, his expression hardening. "Scarlett," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "we need to talk." My heart sank. I knew in that moment that something was terribly wrong. He proceeded to tell me, in no uncertain terms, that I was no longer welcome on the trip. He claimed that my presence would only create unnecessary drama, that I was too unpredictable and unreliable to be trusted with such an important undertaking. He accused me of having ulterior motives, of trying to manipulate the situation to my advantage. His words were like daggers, each one piercing my heart with agonizing precision. I sat there, stunned and speechless, as he continued his tirade, his voice dripping with contempt and disdain. Mom and Dad remained silent, their eyes averted, their inaction speaking volumes. I realized with a sickening jolt that they had known about this all along, that they had condoned Mark's cruel and hurtful behavior. The person I trusted most was one of them, my own mother. She looked at me with pity, and that was worse than any shouting. "Scarlett," she said softly, "it's for the best, dear. You know how Mark gets. We don't want any scenes in Paris." Scenes? I had poured my heart into making their dream come true, and I was the one who would cause a scene. The hypocrisy stung more than the rejection. I wanted to scream, to shout, to unleash the torrent of emotions that were raging inside me, but I held my tongue. I knew that any attempt to defend myself would be futile, that they had already made up their minds. I swallowed my pride, forced a smile, and excused myself, grabbing my purse and the untouched bottle of champagne. As I walked out the door, I heard Mark's triumphant laughter echoing behind me, a sound that would haunt my dreams for weeks to come. That night, I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't break anything. I simply sat in my apartment, staring blankly at the wall, my mind racing with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and a burning desire for retribution. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. They thought they had won, but they were wrong. The game had just begun. The days that followed were a blur of hurt and disbelief. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford, my nights filled with replays of Mark's cruel words and my mother's dismissive gaze. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, contorted with disdain, their voices echoing in my head like a broken record. I tried to convince myself that it was all a bad dream, that I would wake up to find everything back to normal, but the reality was inescapable. They were in Paris, living the dream I had so meticulously crafted, while I was left behind, drowning in a sea of rejection and despair. I attempted to reach out to my mother, hoping to salvage some semblance of our relationship, but my calls went unanswered, my texts ignored. It was as if I had been erased from their lives, deemed unworthy of their attention or affection. Desperate, I even considered swallowing my pride and contacting Mark, begging him to reconsider, to allow me to join them in Paris, even if it meant enduring his constant criticism and condescension. But the thought of subjecting myself to further humiliation was too much to bear. I knew that any attempt to reason with him would be futile, that he would only use my vulnerability as an opportunity to inflict more pain. So I retreated into myself, isolating myself from friends and colleagues, burying myself in work, hoping to distract myself from the gaping hole in my heart. But the pain was relentless, a constant ache that refused to subside. Every social media post from their trip felt like a fresh wound, a reminder of my exclusion and their callous disregard for my feelings. I saw pictures of them laughing and smiling in front of iconic landmarks, indulging in delectable meals, and basking in the romantic ambiance of the City of Lights. Each image was a stab in the heart, a cruel reminder of what I was missing and what they had so deliberately taken away from me. I started having nightmares, vivid and disturbing dreams, in which I was trapped in a labyrinth of Parisian streets, desperately searching for my family, only to find them laughing and pointing at me from a distance, their voices mocking and scornful. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, my body trembling, the line between reality and nightmare blurred beyond recognition. I tried to channel my anger and frustration into something productive, something that would give me a sense of purpose and control. I threw myself into my work, taking on extra projects, working late into the night, hoping to exhaust myself into a state of oblivion. But even that proved to be a futile exercise. My mind was too preoccupied with thoughts of revenge, with fantasies of making them pay for their cruelty and betrayal. I imagined confronting them upon their return, unleashing a torrent of pent-up anger and resentment, exposing their hypocrisy and selfishness for all to see. But I knew that such a confrontation would only serve to further damage our already fractured relationship. I needed a plan, a strategy, a way to exact my revenge without stooping to their level of pettiness and vindictiveness. I started researching ways to get back at someone who had wronged you, scouring the internet for inspiration and ideas. I stumbled upon countless stories of people who had successfully turned the tables on their enemies, reclaiming their power and dignity in the process. Some of the stories were petty and trivial, while others were elaborate and ingenious, but they all had one thing in common: a burning desire for justice and a willingness to go to any lengths to achieve it. As I delved deeper into the world of revenge, I began to realize that the most effective strategies were those that targeted the victim's deepest vulnerabilities, their greatest fears, and their most cherished possessions. I needed to identify my family's weaknesses, to understand their motivations, and to exploit their vulnerabilities in a way that would cause them maximum pain and humiliation. It was a dark and twisted path, but I felt compelled to follow it, driven by an insatiable hunger for retribution. I knew that I couldn't let them get away with what they had done to me. I had to make them pay, not out of spite or malice, but out of a sense of self-preservation. If I allowed them to treat me this way without consequence, I would be sending a message that I was weak and vulnerable, that I could be easily manipulated and exploited. I refused to let that happen. I would show them that I was not someone to be trifled with, that I was capable of fighting back, and that I would not rest until justice was served. The silence they forced upon me would soon become their undoing. Their arrogance would be their downfall. The walls of my apartment seemed to close in, the silence amplifying the echo of their betrayal. I found myself spiraling, each thought a darker descent than the last. The meticulously planned Paris itinerary, once a source of pride, now mocked me from the coffee table, a testament to my naivete. I crumpled the pages, the sound like the tearing of my own heart. Sleep offered no escape, only a relentless replay of their laughter, their dismissive words, their triumphant smiles. I started avoiding mirrors, unable to face the reflection of the broken person staring back. Food lost its flavor, music its melody, life its vibrancy. I was a ghost in my own existence, haunting the edges of a world that no longer felt like mine. One evening, I found myself standing on my balcony, the city lights blurring into a meaningless haze. The wind whipped around me, a cold embrace that mirrored the emptiness inside. A fleeting thought crossed my mind, a whisper of surrender, a tempting invitation to simply let go. The edge beckoned, promising oblivion, a release from the pain that had become unbearable. I gripped the railing, my knuckles white, my body trembling. For a moment, I teetered on the precipice, the abyss staring back at me. Then, something shifted. A flicker of defiance, a spark of resilience ignited within the darkness. I thought of my grandmother, a woman who had survived unimaginable hardships, who had taught me the importance of strength and perseverance. I remembered her words, "Never let anyone break you, Scarlett. You are stronger than you think." Her voice echoed in my mind, a lifeline in the storm. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped back from the edge. The urge to give up didn't disappear entirely, but it no longer held the same power. I would not let them win. I would not let them define me. I would not let their cruelty extinguish the fire within. My mother, desperate to maintain peace and harmony, had always sided with Mark, enabling his behavior and reinforcing my feelings of inadequacy. My father, passive and detached, had simply stood by, unwilling to intervene, unwilling to risk disrupting the family dynamic. As I pieced together the puzzle, I felt a surge of anger, a burning rage that threatened to consume me, but I refused to let it. I knew that anger alone would not be enough. I needed a plan, a strategy, a way to turn their own tactics against them. I started researching their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, their deepest fears. I discovered that Mark was deeply insecure about his career, that he had been secretly struggling to meet the expectations of his superiors. My mother was obsessed with maintaining a perfect image, terrified of public scrutiny and social embarrassment. My father was haunted by regrets, by missed opportunities, by the realization that he had sacrificed his own happiness for the sake of his family. Their biggest weakness? They thought they were untouchable. I began to craft my strategy, a meticulous plan designed to expose their hypocrisy and dismantle their carefully constructed facade. I knew that I couldn't confront them directly, that they would simply deny everything and dismiss me as hysterical. I needed to gather irrefutable evidence, to create a situation where they would be forced to acknowledge their wrongdoing. I started discreetly recording conversations, documenting their lies, and collecting compromising information. I learned to be patient, to be observant, to anticipate their every move. I became a shadow, a silent observer, meticulously gathering the ammunition I would need to wage my war. The Scarlett they thought they knew was gone. In her place was someone cold, calculating, and utterly determined. I smiled. I acted broken, but I was recording everything. The exact day they tried to end me, I would expose the truth. They would lose everything, and I would just smile. Their Parisian dream would become their ultimate nightmare. The game had changed, and this time, I was playing to win. The drip, drip, drip of the eaves outside became the metronome of my revenge. The smile I wore became my mask, a carefully crafted facade that hid the storm raging beneath. I played the part of the dutiful daughter, the forgiving sister, all while meticulously gathering evidence, constructing the framework for their downfall. Dinner conversations became strategic operations, each word measured, each question designed to elicit a revealing response. I researched the laws regarding privacy and consent in both the US and France, ensuring that my methods, while morally questionable in their eyes, remained firmly within the bounds of legality. I invested in high-quality audio recording equipment, discrete devices that could capture every nuance of their conversations without raising suspicion. My apartment transformed into a war room, a command center where I plotted my every move with the precision of a seasoned general. Sleep became a luxury I could scarcely afford, my nights consumed by research, analysis, and planning. I learned about digital forensics, about how to trace IP addresses, recover deleted files, and expose hidden metadata. It was a crash course in espionage, and I was a dedicated student, driven by an insatiable thirst for justice. I even considered hiring a private investigator, but ultimately decided against it. The risk of exposure was too great. I needed to be the sole architect of my revenge, the puppet master pulling the strings from behind the curtain. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, discussing their Parisian adventures, Mark made a careless remark about a business deal he had been working on, a deal that, from his description, seemed ethically dubious at best. My ears perked up. I casually steered the conversation towards the topic, feigning interest, while secretly recording every word. He boasted about cutting corners, about exploiting loopholes, about manipulating clients for personal gain. My blood ran cold. This was it. This was the ammunition I needed. I spent the next few days meticulously verifying his claims, scouring public records, contacting former clients, and piecing together the full extent of his fraudulent activities. The evidence was damning. He had been systematically defrauding investors for months, lining his pockets with their hard-earned money. The more I dug, the more I uncovered, until I had a mountain of evidence that would be enough to bury him. I knew that exposing his crimes would not only ruin his career, but would also bring shame and disgrace upon the entire family. My mother, with her obsession with appearances, would be devastated. My father, with his deep-seated sense of guilt, would be crushed. The thought of inflicting such pain on them gave me pause, but only for a moment. They had shown me no mercy. Why should I show them any? The hardest part was maintaining the facade, pretending that everything was normal, that I had forgiven them for their betrayal. There were moments when I wanted to scream, to lash out, to expose them then and there, but I knew that I had to remain patient, that I had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. I practiced my composure, rehearsing my lines, preparing myself for the inevitable confrontation. I even started seeing a therapist, someone I could confide in without revealing my true intentions. She helped me to process my anger and resentment, to find healthy ways to cope with the stress and anxiety that were consuming me. She also inadvertently provided me with valuable insights into my family's dynamics, helping me to understand their motivations and predict their behavior. It was during one of these sessions that I realized the full extent of my mother's complicity in Mark's cruelty. She wasn't just enabling him, she was actively encouraging him, subtly manipulating situations to her advantage. She saw me as a threat to her own happiness, as someone who might steal her spotlight. The revelation was a punch to the gut. It solidified my resolve. There would be no forgiveness. There would be no reconciliation. There would only be retribution. As the days turned into weeks, the anticipation grew unbearable. I felt like a coiled spring, wound tighter and tighter, ready to snap at any moment. I meticulously planned every detail of my final strike, ensuring that nothing was left to chance. I drafted a detailed exposé outlining Mark's fraudulent activities, my mother's complicity, and my father's passive indifference. I gathered all of my evidence, organizing it into a clear and concise presentation. I even consulted with a lawyer, seeking advice on how to protect myself from any potential legal repercussions. The lawyer, a sharp and experienced woman, listened intently to my story, her eyes narrowing as I revealed the extent of my plan. She warned me about the risks involved, about the potential for backlash, about the possibility of damaging my own reputation. But she also acknowledged the validity of my grievances, the injustice of their actions, and the need for accountability. In the end, she agreed to represent me, to help me navigate the legal complexities of my revenge. With her guidance, I refined my plan, making it even more airtight, even more devastating. The countdown had begun. The exact day they tried to end me, I would expose the truth. The final piece of the puzzle landed in my lap quite by accident. It wasn't some grand discovery, not a smoking gun hidden in a forgotten file. It was something far more potent, their own hubris. I was at their house for Sunday dinner, playing the part of the reformed black sheep, when Mark started bragging about a new investment opportunity he was spearheading. It was a real estate deal, a luxury condo development on the coast of France, conveniently close to their dream Parisian escape. He detailed the projected profits, the lavish amenities, the exclusivity of the location. My mother, predictably, beamed with pride, while my father offered a rare word of cautious approval. But it was a single phrase, dropped casually into the conversation, that made my blood run cold. "We've already secured the permits," Mark said, with a smug grin. "Let's just say a few well-placed donations smoothed the way." My mind raced. I knew enough about French bureaucracy to understand that securing permits for a development of that scale was a Herculean task, fraught with red tape and political maneuvering. For him to obtain them so easily, so quickly, suggested something far more sinister than mere donations. I excused myself from the table, feigning a headache, and retreated to the guest bathroom. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. I started researching French real estate regulations, focusing on the laws governing permit approvals and environmental impact assessments. The more I read, the more horrified I became. It was clear that Mark's project was riddled with violations, that he had cut corners, bribed officials, and falsified documents to get the permits approved. He had not only defrauded investors, he had also corrupted the system, endangering the environment and compromising the integrity of the local community. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, about greed, about a willingness to sacrifice anything and anyone for personal gain. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. This was bigger than I ever imagined. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. I knew that if I could expose his crimes, I could not only bring him down, but also dismantle his entire network of corruption. But I also knew that I had to be careful, that I had to proceed with caution. Mark was a powerful man with connections in high places. If he suspected that I was onto him, he would stop at nothing to silence me. I needed to gather more evidence, to build an airtight case that would withstand any scrutiny. I needed to find someone on the inside, someone who was willing to risk everything to expose the truth. An idea began to form in my mind, a dangerous and audacious plan that could either bring them crashing down or consume me in the process. I knew that I couldn't do it alone. I needed an ally, someone who had the skills and resources to help me navigate the treacherous waters of French politics and media. I thought of Isabelle, an old college friend who worked as a journalist in Paris. She was smart, resourceful, and fiercely independent, with a reputation for uncovering corruption and holding powerful people accountable. We had lost touch over the years, but I knew that if anyone could help me, it was her. I sent her a message, a cryptic invitation to reconnect, hinting at a story that would blow the lid off the Parisian elite. To my relief, she responded immediately, eager to hear what I had to say. We arranged to meet in a discreet cafe in the Marais district of Paris, a place where we could talk freely without being overheard. As I waited for her to arrive, my heart pounded in my chest. This was it. This was the moment of truth. Everything depended on whether she would believe me, whether she would be willing to help me expose the truth. Isabelle arrived, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. After a warm embrace, we settled into a quiet corner of the cafe, and I began to tell her everything. I recounted the events of the past few months, from their betrayal in Paris to my discovery of Mark's fraudulent activities. I showed her the evidence I had gathered, the documents, the recordings, the financial statements. She listened intently, her expression growing increasingly grim. When I finished, she sat in silence for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Then she looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "Scarlett," she said, "this is huge. If what you're saying is true, this could bring down some very powerful people." I nodded, my voice trembling. "I know. That's why I need your help. I can't do this alone." Isabel smiled, a fierce and unwavering smile. "Of course I'll help you. This is exactly the kind of story I've been waiting for." And with that, the trap was set. The wheels of justice, or perhaps more accurately, the wheels of revenge, began to turn. We spent the next few weeks working tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle, verifying the evidence, and building our case. Isabel used her contacts in the French media to discreetly investigate Mark's project, uncovering a web of corruption that extended far beyond what I had initially suspected. She discovered that he had not only bribed local officials, but had also colluded with organized crime figures to secure the land for his development. The more we dug, the more dangerous the situation became. We received failed threats, anonymous phone calls, and unsettling messages on social media. It was clear that Mark and his associates were aware that we were onto them and were doing everything in their power to stop us. But we refused to be intimidated. We were driven by a shared sense of outrage, a burning desire to expose the truth and hold them accountable for their actions. The closer we got to the truth, the more desperate they became. The final piece of our plan involved a meticulously orchestrated press conference, timed to coincide with the groundbreaking ceremony for Mark's luxury condo development. We leaked the story to several major news outlets, providing them with irrefutable evidence of his crimes. We knew that once the story broke, the authorities would be forced to act. The day of the press conference arrived, and my nerves were on edge. I stood backstage, listening to Isabel address the crowd, her voice ringing with conviction as she exposed Mark's corruption to the world. I could hear the gasps of shock, the murmurs of disbelief, the clicking of cameras. It was happening. My plan was finally coming to fruition. But then, something unexpected occurred. Just as Isabel was about to reveal the final piece of evidence, the microphone cut out. The lights flickered and died. Chaos erupted in the room. People started screaming, pushing, and shoving. In the confusion, I saw a figure emerge from the shadows, heading straight for Isabel. It was Mark. His face was contorted with rage, his eyes burning with malice. He lunged at her, his hand raised, ready to strike. Time seemed to slow down. I watched in horror, unable to move, paralyzed by fear. This was it. This was the moment of truth. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, was about to be destroyed. The exact day they tried to end me, I don't know what came over me. Everything was in slow motion. Seeing Mark lunge toward Isabel, a primal rage surged through me, eclipsing all fear. It was as if every injustice, every humiliation, every betrayal coalesced into a single blinding point of fury. Without thinking, I surged forward, shoving past the stunned reporters and security guards. I moved faster than I ever thought possible, fueled by pure adrenaline. I screamed his name, a guttural roar that echoed through the suddenly silent room. Mark turned, his face a mask of shock and fury, just as I reached him. I didn't punch him, I didn't scream at him. Instead, I ripped the flash drive from my pocket, the one containing every piece of evidence, every damning recording, every financial transaction, every dirty secret, and jammed it into the nearest laptop, which happened to be connected to the venue's massive display screen. The screen flickered, then exploded with data. Bank statements, emails, photographs of Mark handing over envelopes of cash to corrupt officials, architectural plans riddled with code violations, everything splashed across the giant screen for the world to see. The room erupted again, this time with a collective gasp of understanding. Mark froze, his face slowly crumbling as he watched his meticulously constructed world disintegrate before his eyes. The crimson drained from his face, leaving him ashen and gaunt. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut, collapsing in on himself. The authorities swarmed him instantly. He didn't resist. He didn't say a word. He simply stood there, defeated, as they led him away in handcuffs. My mother stood nearby, her face a study in disbelief and horror. Her perfect facade, the carefully crafted image of wealth and respectability, lay shattered at her feet. Our eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of something, regret, shame, in her gaze. But it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard stare. She would never forgive me for this. I knew that. but I didn't care. My father, as always, remained silent, his face etched with a deep sadness. He seemed to have aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes, the weight of his family's sins crushing him. He didn't meet my eyes. The press conference dissolved into utter chaos. Reporters clamored for answers, cameras flashed, and the air crackled with the energy of a scandal about to explode. Isabel, shaken but unharmed, gave me a grateful look. We had done it. We had exposed the truth. As the dust settled, the repercussions began to unfold with breathtaking speed. Mark's company was immediately placed under investigation, his assets frozen, his reputation in tatters. The French authorities launched a full-scale inquiry into the permit scandal, arresting several government officials and business associates. The luxury condo development was shut down, the land seized, and Mark faced a slew of charges, from fraud and bribery to corruption and conspiracy. My family, once pillars of Parisian society, became pariahs, ostracized by their friends and colleagues. My mother retreated into a world of denial, refusing to acknowledge the extent of Mark's crimes or her own complicity. My father, consumed by guilt and shame, became even more withdrawn and isolated. Their world, built on lies and deceit, had crumbled, leaving them with nothing but the wreckage of their past. As for me, I disappeared. I changed my name, my appearance, my location. I needed to escape the spotlight, to rebuild my life far away from the toxic influence of my family. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt empty. The revenge I had so meticulously planned had been executed flawlessly, but it hadn't brought me the satisfaction I had expected. It hadn't healed my wounds or erased the pain of their betrayal. It had simply left me with a profound sense of loss and a deeper understanding of the dark side of human nature. Years later, I received a letter from Isabel. Mark had been convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to a lengthy prison term. My mother, stripped of her wealth and status, was living a solitary life in a small apartment on the outskirts of Paris. My father had passed away, his heart finally giving out under the weight of his regrets. I read the letter with a sense of detachment, as if I were reading about the lives of strangers. I felt no pity, no remorse, no sense of closure. Their story was over. Mine was just beginning. I closed the letter, tucked it away in a drawer, and walked out into the sunshine, ready to face the future, whatever it may hold. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.